Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Spitfire Audio Kepler Orchestra, but before I dig into this I should just start with saying the sounds are exemplary. As soon as you start playing this, and I have to say this goes for all the Spitfire audio libraries I've played with, they have a tendency to be more of a writing assistant than a simple box of sounds. A bit like if you've ever got a new synth and some of the presets jump out as extremely usable and whatever you play just sounds right. They tend to lead to new compositions. With Spitfire Audio, I think that's because they sound so good. I'm not sure what they do, but either the way they're recorded or how they're processed, the samples sort of really draw you in, and I can just play them for ages for the sheer enjoyment of listening to them. I remember playing either one of the Albion Collection or British Drama Toolkits in a friend's studio, and pretty much every time I touched the keyboard, ideas sort of appeared. They just sort of popped out of thin air like magic. So just to show you an example, I've loaded in some cello here, so cello grid. Beautiful, that, isn't it? There's another one. It instantly sounds, I think, not just professional, not just a well-recorded sound, but it sounds well-produced. Pretty much the final product straight out of the box. I could imagine hearing this simply on its own on a soundtrack. I know I've not sort of split the instruments into violas and cellos and basses, but just as that sounds, I think that's gorgeous. No other processing required. It's incredibly atmospheric, and I think that's a reflection of the Spitfire team's passion for doing this. So hopefully that's whetted your appetite to stay on for a bit longer. So what is Kepler? Well, I'd say it's almost like an orchestration writing kit. It's not like something like the Audio Brothers LA Strings or the IK Multimedia libraries where you can have a myriad of different articulations for you to hone each note and each section of the orchestra's performance. For example, there's no playing articulations with your left hand while playing notes with your right. None of that nonsense here. That's not what Kepler's about, and I don't think that's really Spitfire's forte. They're renowned for, as I say, the quality of the recordings and the usefulness of the sounds straight out of the box, ready to go. But before I go further, it does have its idiosyncrasies. At times you can hear differences in the sample layers from one sound to another. I'll just play one I found while making this demo. So if we listen to this, play an F to a G to an A. And if you're looking for exact matches to sounds across the keyboard, this isn't for you, but it's not what this is about. I'll explain this grid in more detail in a minute. And occasionally I've noticed in this library the timings of the layers or the phrasings to be slightly different from one another. I suppose if you've got a few cellists playing a lot of notes and a lot of different speeds, it's pretty much impossible to get them all exactly the same over the day's recording. But here's an example of that. Doesn't sound perfectly in time, that, but there is a quick workaround. So to tighten them, I've just added a little Logic's tremolo and it just pulls the phrasing together. That's much better, isn't it? So none of that really matters, and once it's mixed in, it just sounds really lush. So no, it's not perfect, especially if your ears are used to electronic music and highly quantized and repetitive loops. But it sounds live, it sounds emotional, and most of all, they simply sound lovely. If you've not seen Christian from Spitfire's demo of orchestral systems music, you really should. Not only did I learn that little tremolo trick, but he pretty much composed what could be the next Batman theme tune using mainly Kepler Orchestra. He did also add a couple of parts from another Spitfire sample library. I think it was Albion 5, plus a modular he describes as the bastard. So if you want to see a demo of how good this can sound, I highly recommend it. I'll put a link in the description. So I've pulled up a couple of little niggles already. Kepler's an orchestra library which has got no articulations, it's got audible sample layers, and it's got imperfect timings. It's not velocity sensitive. You use these dynamic and expression controllers here. I'm controlling those with my Moog Sub 37. You can see just in this top right hand corner, which is probably a much more effective way of controlling the sound of the orchestra anyway. It hasn't got different samples for changes in expression. You saw me playing from sample layer to sample layer, so it doesn't have players blowing harder or striking strings with more or less force, and this can really chomp through your CPU like a hungry gorilla. If I just pull up, say, high strings, because this one, for me, does it a lot. Let's just pull up my CPU threads. So you can hear some crackles. I've got my buffer set to maximum. I've got 12 cores, 3.46 gigahertz each, so it's no slouch, but I do get these crackles with some of the sounds. They don't interfere with anything. As soon as you bounced it down, it's fine. But just to be aware that you will be bouncing stuff down. But none of that seems to matter because it's got a few tricks of its own up its sleeve. The first, and probably the most important, is this matrix that I touched on earlier. And this determines the speed the samples are played back at. And this is its USP, I suppose. So let's just play these high strings, okay? So that's playing at 120 BPM, you can see up here. So nice. Press Option and Command, and we'll change them all. So we've got it in third, fifths and sevenths as well. So we've got a huge selection. And then you can play between them as well, so you can get sort of different sort of weird polyrhythms and stuff going on. Which instantly sounds like an orchestra playing, doesn't it? The fact that you can mix them up really pulls out some complex textures really simply. On the left here, we've got the sample layers, and oddly, it starts with the low notes at the top and the high notes at the bottom. And across there, you've got the different timings. Volume and pan, and then you can turn the effects on and off, so the effects are all here. Underneath the controllers and the signals that are coming from 4 different mics. Or you can pull up a mix version, which has mixed all the mics together for simplicity. And the real beauty of this grid is that the sample for each layers and the timings has been done individually. So these aren't clever ways that they've computationally taken the samples and split them up and then made them faster. They're literally string players playing quicker. So taking the basses as an example. And then we make it faster. Even if you use round robin samples, so they're all slightly different, you don't get the same effect as literally a player playing the note 16 times. And I think that's where it sounds really authentic and it gets that sort of atmospheric feel. Another little trick you've got with the grid is you can got sort of various sort of presets, I suppose, with your quintuplets, your sextuplets. So just for playing various things across the keyboard. Option and Command means you choose them all, move them all. And if you press Shift, you get something like this. Interesting. So you can really quickly get some really crazy things. That can instantly sound like you can make brilliant orchestrations with really cool syncopations. Very nice. The next thing it's got up its sleeve is the variation of sounds that have been recorded. So we've got muted sulpant, muted tremolo, momentum, which is sort of almost like a crescendo, and pulsating momentum. So it's momentum with an accelerating, and this accelerate momentum. We've got shards, which are just crescendos, creshards with time machine, so they all end at the same time. Dopplers, which are that's what they are. But it all adds up to this really sort of great cinematic library. So let's play those chords I played earlier using a selection of these sounds. So that was the accelerated momentum from woodwinds. I've done it first sort of straight with just crotchets, and then I've done it with a mix of duplets, triplets, quintuplets, and septuplets, and try writing that on a stave. Just so rich and full and instant, isn't it? It's great fun, this library. So you can see from those sounds you can get a whole range of cinematic ambiences and textures. Brilliant for video games as well. Great for all sorts of media productions. So the tricks Kepler's got up his sleeve are the grid, the quality of sounds, the range of different sort of playing techniques that have been used. And finally is this warped section. And as I said earlier, these are based on the library sounds, and they've been sort of distorted and filtered and messed around with. And they've put them into the Mercury engine. So let's just play this. That's the first time I had that up. Lovely. We've got low pass filters, high pass filters. We've got some LFOs. Let's just have a listen to these. It's almost like everything you play and everything you press just sounds really atmospheric and amazing. So we've got low pass, high pass, low frequencies. We've got some effects across the bottom of this yoke, which you can assign different parameters to. But the beauty of these sounds are they're a great way of expanding the musical palette. So if your sound sources are mainly electronic, these can add an organic quality without being too sort of traditional sounding. And this can raise a composition above something that's solely electronic and brings in sort of really nice new textures. And let's face it, that's why a lot of us use samples, to build texture and add that little extra bit of ear candy, and everything I seem to play with this brings it on in bucket loads. And with these, obviously, you can use them more musically than you can with sort of rhythmic samples. So they're heavily processed, but they still sound organic somehow. And if you mainly use orchestral or live sounds, these have a modern twist that sits well with traditional sounds having been built on them in the first place. So I did a couple of these over some beats, just really simple stuff. Really just to show how they work well in a sort of more modern setting. So these are just beats straight from Apple loops. I think these are jazzy drums and just gone to... I think that's the first one that pops up. So it's not like I'm trying my hardest to make these fit. They just do. So yeah, you add those textures in on top of your strings and on top of your Doppler effects and your shards, your momentum. You've got like a massive palette of sounds here. I think it's fantastic. So in conclusion, I think this is a fabulous package. I have had some issues with CPU usage, as I mentioned, but nothing that's insurmountable. And this quantize in here, I've not really got that working as well as I should have, I don't think. But it's a bit of a mystery to me, to be honest. Other than that, every time I play something, it just sounds fabulous. So it's $299, so about just over £250. So it's not a small investment for a sample library, but I think if you get this, you'll have an awful lot of things covered. So I hope that's been of some use to someone. I've really enjoyed playing with this. I think it's a great little thing. See you next time.